Our speaker is my colleague Elizabeth Hodges, and she received her bachelor's degree in history from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. And while pursuing her master's in Irish and Irish American Studies at New York University, she became an educator at the Lower East Side Tenement Museum in New York City. She later worked at the New York Public Library while pursuing her Master of Science in Library and Information Science from St. John's University in New York before joining the staff of the Genealogy Center. So I will go ahead and hand it over to her.
So thanks everybody for attending this evening. I am a big fan of PERSI, and as Kate just said, I am also very big into doing Irish research. So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to kind of blend the two together. So let's go ahead and jump on in. So for those of you who maybe have never visited us before, here's just a couple facts about the Genealogy Center. Our department is 42,000 square feet of open stacks. What I mean by that is that it is your playground. So 42,000 square feet of rows of books, periodicals, all kinds of stuff that you can find. So we have 1.34 million physical items. These numbers on this slide are actually a little lower than they currently are because I'm not sure what the most recent numbers, because we're getting new books and new things all the time. So in general, we have a little over 500,000 books, just under 800,000 items of what we call microtext, which is our fancy word for microfilm and microfiche. We also have 5 million digital records, give or take. So we're talking over 6.34 million items in total in our collection. Now, we're here to talk about periodicals. So if you're not using periodicals in your research, you're potentially missing out on a lot of clues and breadcrumbs. So if you do start using periodicals for your research, these are the types of periodicals that you usually would use for genealogy. So you're going to want to look at society publications. And what I mean by that is anything. So genealogical societies, local historical societies, family surname societies, also there are ethnic societies as well. There's also special interest group publications, technology, and online publications as well. This wall, I actually want to take a moment to point out this wall. This wall, when we get new periodicals in, we will put them in these boxes on the east side of our department along this very, very long wall. They're alphabetical by the name of the journal. Now, when we get a certain number of them, say for a year or two, we will bind them together on the shelves in library binding, so your grandchildren's grandchildren will be able to use them. But if you're visiting us and you're looking for something that maybe was published in the last year or so, and you can't find it on the shelves, check the wall. So here are some of the benefits of using periodicals in your research. So as I said, if you don't use periodicals in your family research, you're potentially eliminating over a third of the materials that could provide you with answers, suggestions, hints, breadcrumbs, sources where you can continue your journey. Also, when you get a brick wall and you think you've found everything you could find online and in books and on microfilm, I can guarantee you there is always the possibility of another critical clue in a periodical just waiting to be discovered. So the things I listed on this slide, these are just some of the examples of benefits of using periodicals. As far as unique, forgotten, or lost sources of data, this is really important for people doing Irish research. Just because a lot was lost in 1922, so you can find sometimes abstracts of things that you won't find anywhere else buried in a periodical. So that's one thing that's super, super important when we're doing Irish research. But also, lists of holdings in regional libraries and archives. If you don't know where something is, you might be able to find it by looking at a periodical, right? So if you see, say, an abstract of church records and they're not online anywhere, usually the person who wrote that article or did that, compiled that data, they will say often at the beginning or at the very end where they got the information from. So these are all things you can find, and there's so many different types of things in a single publication. I mean, I've actually seen articles where it was a picture of a family reunion where this woman brought this quilt, and she didn't just put her family tree on a quilt, she cited her sources on the quilt. I mean, it's just wild stuff, so you never really know what you're going to find. So types of Irish treasures you might find in PERSI: critical historical context, which, you know, as someone whose first master's degree was specifically in Irish history, I cannot emphasize enough how much historical context is important for researching your family story. You could also find local census substitutes, which I'll show an example of that in just a moment. As I said a moment ago, abstracted church records. You can also sometimes find passenger lists as well, school records, which I'll show an example of that as well. There are court record abstracts, directories, and just so much more. So let's take a look at just a couple of examples from this. So the first being is abstracted church records. So this parish, this is from the Valley Boy, Kings County, which is now County Offaly. These 3 volumes of parish registers from 1796 to 1883, they were destroyed in the Public Records Office in Dublin in 1922. But a copy was made by Reverend John Thomas Webster, and he donated those to the Representative Church Body Library. But those records are not online. But here's the thing. Looking at this, this is something that, you know, if you're in the United States, you can actually look at this. And you now know there's a copy that exists, and you can go find those original records. Census substitutes, I mean, this is a big one. The census is a really sad, depressing story in Ireland. The 1821 census, apparently none of it was supposed to survive for County Monaghan. However, this man, Dennis Carolyn Rush, he was a 19th century historian of County Monaghan, and when he was planning on writing these 3 historical works of the county, he had the opportunity to gather material from the Public Records Office in Dublin before the 1922 fire. Most of his papers and those books now live in St. Macartan's College, Monaghan, in the college archive. But so despite the fact that nothing from the census from 1821 to 1901 was supposed to survive, his notes include some extracts from the 1821 census. So that's what this is going to look like. So, I mean, all this really good data that otherwise is lost, all just waiting for you in a periodical. And if you want to end up going to look at the original, his original notes, you now know where it lives. Directories and substitutes. So this is a compiled directory. So I know for Americans who are tuning in tonight, we're very used to city directory, right? This is a little different. So this Belfast directory from 1740, you can see there's a list of sources. This is a compiled directory using a number of sources, including a subscriber list, the Belfast newsletter files, other subscriber lists, all kinds of good stuff, including voters. So when you see these names here, you'll see the name, the occupation. You'll also see the citation, so where it came from. You can then go find more information from there. Here's just another page of that, right? So these are all great things to dig into. School records are something that people don't think to look for. Not everyone would have necessarily gone to a school like Kilmore Abbey, but there were hedge schools as well that people would have been going to. It's definitely worth looking into if you had ancestors who were still in Ireland of schooling age in the late 19th century. So the story with this is that while doing research into the history of St. Augustine's College, which is also known as Kilmore Abbey, this is a county cabin, which is actually where my people are from, a list of every student who attended the school was compiled from the account books of the college. So since such a list is a bit unusual, it was decided that they publish the students' names in this journal, which with the dates when they attended the school and any additional information on each student. So here you see we have the names, but then some you're going to have more information than others, like when the person attended the school, and you'll see like where they're from. Other people, it won't be as much information. Sometimes it's like awards, for, their schooling, etc. But you never really know where you're going to find until you start digging into this stuff. Now, historical context, I really wanted to show this example because I have a personal connection to this, actually. My great-great-great-grandfather, Samuel Hodges, we call him Samuel Hodges Coast Guard because there are more than one Samuel Hodges in the family, but he was in the Coast Guard in Ireland in the early days of the Coast Guard, back when it was called the Preventative Water Guard. So this particular article is about the history of the Coast Guard in Ireland, and it gives me an idea of kind of what was life like for him. I was able to find his Coast Guard records in the British National Archives, but he was moving around to so many Coast Guard stations. I wanted to see in this article, why might that be the case? Although one instance, apparently his wife was misbehaving. They actually wrote that as the reason for his transfer. Don't know what the story was on that. But they also included drawings of these Coast Guard stations, some of which are actually still standing, but many of which are gone. So this is really awesome context that just adds color to his story beyond just him moving around. So what is PERSI? What is the Periodical Source Index? It is the largest subject index, genealogical, historical, and ethnic periodical publications that are published in North America and the British Isles. So this number of 3.02 million subject entries, that number is actually is low. I think we're now at maybe 3.8 million. I'm not quite sure. I know it's gone up a lot since I first put this presentation together, but I want to make this abundantly clear. This is a subject index, not an every name index. What that means, I'll get into a little bit more what that means in just a moment, but what that essentially means is that if your ancestor is not the subject of an article, if you look for their name, they're not going to come up. If they're mentioned in another article, their name won't come up. If they are the subject, they will come up. So if the article is about John Adams, you'll find him. If John Adams is mentioned in some church record abstracts, the church records, that is the subject. We'll get into details about that in a moment. But right now, we're kind of focusing on indexing the geographic and ethnic publications. But for now, that might change. So let's get into how you use it. So if you go to our homepage, which is genealogycenter.org, there are a couple places where you can find it. First being, if you click on this red button, it's in our list of free databases under the Periodical Source Index. But an easier way is if you just scroll down, just below that, you'll see a button for PERSI in orange. So if you click on that, you're brought to this kind of PERSI landing page, this PERSI homepage. Now, a lot of people will start by clicking this surname button, and they'll search for their family name, get frustrated, and that's where their story ends. That's where their journey with PERSI ends. I'm here to tell you, don't do that. If you are looking for your articles about your family, yes, use the surname button. But if you don't find an article that is dedicated to your family, don't stress out. Don't panic. You will still find good stuff using PERSI, but you might have to go to those geographic locations instead and try to find them within other records. But since people like to start with PERSI, that's where start with the surname button. That's where we're going to start right now. So if you click on the surnames, you just get a box that says surname, and you can put a name in. Now, the nice thing about PERSI, the way it exists now, so if any of you have used PERSI in the past, it used to live on other websites behind paywalls. Most recently, it used to live on Find My Past. And one of the things that it wasn't able to do in its previous iterations was differentiate between names that are other things. So for example, street, that is a last name, but it is also a thing you drive down, right? The street you walk down, the street you drive down. If you search street, you will see only articles about the surname street. See, we have Abraham Street, Alfred B. Street, etc. So this is how that works for the surnames. Now, when you're on the search result page, there are a couple things to point out. So there are 4 columns here. From left to right, we have the article title, we have the periodical, so the name of the periodical, volume, issue number, the year, also where it lives on the shelf in our department. So if it's in PERSI, that means we have it. This column is just the year that it's published, and we have the publisher information. So the name of the publisher and also their mailing address. The reason why we have this is so if you, say, want to get a copy of the periodical from the publisher, which we'll talk about getting copies of things and towards the end of this, but if you want to get a copy of it, you can contact the publisher. So we do want to make that information available. Now, when you first get to a search result page and you want to start filtering your search results down, take a moment and pause and just look at the verbiage being used in the article titles, because the titles are not verbatim. They're not the exact title usually. Depending on when something was indexed, PERSI, the way it used to work, on the back end was that when you put in a title, you only had room for a certain number of characters. It isn't quite like that anymore. Some titles will be longer than others, but you see how some things are abbreviated, family is abbreviated, the states are going to be abbreviated. When you're searching to filter down to a state, try using this, like the mailing, the postal abbreviation. Do all of those things because you want to start kind of broad and use kind of conservative search terms and then kind of narrow down from there. And the way you would do that is by using this search bar. So this search bar will search all 4 of these columns, but if you scroll all the way to the bottom, other thing I want to point out is this button, the click here to order articles, that brings you to a PDF where you can fill in the article titles and then you would mail it to us. I will explain that towards the end, but I just want to point out that there's a button on every single search result list in PERSI for that PDF. Now, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the number of entries. You'll also see a search bar for each column. So say you want to search, filter down to just a certain publication, maybe a certain publisher, or you want to filter these things out. Like you don't want to search these, you just want to search the title, you can do that. Okay, so let's talk about the United States, because a lot of Irish people ended up in the United States. You are going to want to search in periodicals that are published not just over there in Ireland and England. You want to search for periodicals that were published here as well. So let's click on the United States button. Now, as someone who is from Louisiana, I decided to use Louisiana as an example. So what you can do here is you select a state and you can select a county, or in this case, parish, or you can do any, so statewide. That's what we're going to do. So the list is actually, when it displays on the screen, it's a very long list that I couldn't fit into a single screenshot, so I kind of did it like this. So these are just subject categories. So, I mean, you see the numbers here. But this is statewide, so it's going to be big. So I'm going to show you an example from these 3 specifically. So if you click on church records, say I wanted to just see things relating to Irish churches. Just typing in Irish, it filters down to show me St. Louis Cathedral Irish funerals and marriages. It filters it down to 7 out of 2,188. I would say the 7 is much more manageable compared to 2,100. Now, institutions, say I want to look for orphanages. This article is actually about Catholic orphanages. I've read this article, it's quite good. It's talking about how Irish families, they would, during times of crisis, like yellow fever epidemics, especially yellow fever epidemics in the 1850s, they would put their kids into Catholic orphanages temporarily, because the idea was that the nuns are more likely to make sure their kids survive than they would living in their neighborhoods. And whatever family member lived through yellow fever season would go and reclaim that child. It's a really interesting study, so 10 out of 10 recommend if you're interested in that. One thing I do want to point out, when you're searching, like trying to filter down to see like Irish related things, If you search Irish, you get this title. If you search Ireland, you get this title. So that's why you want to be kind of broad and be creative with your searches. Now, if you type Ireland, I-R-E, period, it will filter it down differently. So if you were to type out Ireland, the full word, you actually wouldn't get these articles. So that's why, again, you want to be really creative with how you're doing your searches. Another thing I kind of want to point out is that, say you're looking for things just relating to the 1850s, if you type in 185, it'll show you every title that has 185 in the title. What this is that PERSI doesn't do wildcard searches. It doesn't do Boolean operators. Remember, we're not Ancestry. We're not Google. We are a public library, but you can still like recreate those types of searches just by being creative. Now, I also want to point out that every county or state will have more or less articles on specific subjects than others. It all kind of depends on the area. So this is the long list for Orleans Parish. Say, we're talking about somewhere in Indiana, they might not necessarily have things on Natchez or the French Revolution, right? But Orleans Parish in Louisiana will. So the Canadian button is very similar to the United States, and we're not going to get into that. But what we're all here for is this British Isles button. Now, there are a couple of tricks to searching for Irish thing using the British Isles button. You want to keep the historical and political timeline of Ireland in mind. So the subjects of many, if not most, of the articles in PERSI relate to records, local histories, etc., from before the partition of Ireland in 1921. So if you are searching for articles in a county that is currently in Northern Ireland, you want to search under both Northern Ireland and Ireland, which will have, Ireland will usually have more articles than Northern Ireland, which I'll show you an example of that in a moment. The other thing I want to point out is that county and city/town names, if you're searching for a county that is also the name of a town, for example, Cabin Town, County Cabin, or Derry, County Derry, what PERSI will do, thankfully, is it will lump those articles together, so you won't be excluding the town or the city if you're searching for the county. So we'll just kind of put it all together, right? Now, the thing about Derry and Londonderry, there are two things. You want to search under both names. You also want to search under both Ireland, which has the most results, and Northern Ireland. We'll take a look at what that looks like. So we have over here, Ireland, Derry. You see the number of articles per subject. The most staggering one, church records, 38. Now, if you compare that to Londonderry, church records, 12. It all depends on the language used in the article title by the person who wrote the article. Now, if we look at Northern Ireland, Derry, these are the only articles. So that's why it's important to kind of keep those things in mind. Search for all of it, right? Search in both Ireland, Northern Ireland. If there are different names, like name changes, one group of people might call a place one thing, another group of people might call a place a different thing. Search for all of it. The last two buttons we're going to go over. Now, I'm trying to leave plenty of time for questions and live searching, so don't worry, this program won't end too early. There are two buttons, the research technique button and the article title keyword button. So the research technique articles, this is kind of like, think of them kind of like your genealogy guidebooks. If you want to know how to do a certain type of research, like, census records for Ireland is a good example, just because the Irish census, like I said, it's a very sad story. We don't really have one really until 1901. So how can you best get around that struggle? Well, if you want suggestions, take a look at these articles. So when you do that search, it will give you a list of census records, and then we have geographic locations. This would ordinarily be a very long list on a page, but again, didn't have enough room to screenshot. So this is how we're doing this. So if you click on Ireland, you'll see there's 148 articles in here. It's not a small amount of articles. So looking at the search results, 1901 Census Online, Agricultural Census Guide excerpt from May 2003, argument for opening the 1926 census early, which is really funny, beginning Irish research tips and resources, census and census substitutes. All these are good things to kind of give you ideas, especially these articles about census substitutes. Because we all know, well, if you've done Irish genealogy for a while, you're probably familiar with Griffith's valuation and some other things that are great census substitutes. But what about the unique ones, the ones that we don't know about? These are good places to get some ideas. Now, the last button is the article title search. This is a keyword search. Say you want an article about a certain type of thing, like indentured servitude, or maybe you remember reading an article, but you can't remember the name exactly, but you kind of know what it's about. You might be able to find it like this. Now, I will say, even though wildcard searches don't work, parentheses, in the case of this keyword box, that does work. So say you're searching for indenture Maryland, like MD, you could put those in quotes and see what comes up. So I'm just going to search indenture here. It gave me a really long list of search results, right? Really long list of articles. So I wanted to filter it down to just Maryland. So I filtered it down to just MD. If you scroll to the bottom, you can see I went from 931 articles to 18. I'd say 18 is a lot more manageable. A lot of people, when I give presentations about just using PERSI in general, a lot of people ask, well, how do I see what years you have for a specific publication? Can you find that in PERSI? Not exactly. That's not the best way to find that kind of information, but I can tell you where you can find that information. You have to search for the periodical title in the Libraryies catalog. The way to do that, if you go back to our home page, you'll see this box in the right-hand side, search research collection. This is the research catalog. Just as an example, I chose the New York Genealogical and Biographical Record. If you click on this, you'll see how this says website 1870 volume 1 web link. That doesn't mean that there's only one volume that is digitized. This is just in the initial search result page when you search in the catalog. If you click on the actual title and open up the entire record, you'll see the title here, but if you scroll down the page a little bit, you'll see this note, click on web address to reach selected volumes, and you'll see all these links. Now, if you scroll down the page even further, you'll see the call numbers of where these things live on the shelf. And you'll also see at the end of those call numbers, the dates for each periodical, right? So if it's something that hasn't been digitized, just scroll down the page and you'll see those call numbers and you'll see those dates as well. But if it has been, you'll have links to it, which is great. So if you click on these links, they'll bring you to Internet Archive, which is great. Many of you are probably thinking, okay, this is all well and good, right? But how do I actually get the article? That's great. That's an excellent question to be wondering. There are 3 ways of requesting articles. These are the things you should try first before contacting us. Try the publisher first. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, if you're looking at a periodical that is published in Europe, not published in the United States. Now, there are plenty of Irish American periodicals out there that we have no issue with making copies of. But we cannot make copies of periodicals published in Europe because they have stricter copyright laws, and the societies really don't like us doing it. So contact the publisher if you're trying to get articles that are published in Europe. If you don't want to do that, see if there's a library near you that does have it. You can use worldcat.org and just search the periodical title, not the article title, but the title of the publication, and see where you can find it close to you. If that doesn't pan out, you can contact us for all those things that are not published in Europe. While we are more than happy to fulfill all of your requests, this isn't the fastest or simplest way to obtain articles. That's why, your best option is to utilize option 1 and 2 first. The wait time, let's say it's like on average 4 to 6 weeks for us to fulfill requests, just because we're getting so many PERSI requests now that PERSI is free to search in. Now for copies, if we were to make copies, there is a fee for that. It's $7.50 for up to and including 6 articles, plus 20 cents a page, and we don't include the periodical cover title page. So the way you would do this is actually get the form. You can email it. I would recommend mailing it actually, because you would have to send a check or money order for $7.50 with your form. When we fulfill your request and send it back to you, we give you an invoice for the remainder, because we don't know how many pages it is until we pull it off the shelf. We have loads of time for questions and live searching.
Our first one is PERSI only accessible in the library, or can it be accessed from home?
You can definitely access it from home. I make myself a little list of things in the middle of the night to go pull once I come back to work. So yeah, you can definitely search in at home.
Is it possible to search for a specific periodical by title or by location?
Use the catalog for that. Yeah, the library catalog.
Robin asks, can multiple search criteria be entered in search boxes, such as like a year or page number and a location?
There is a way of doing it. Let me see if I can recreate that. Say I want things relating to the 1880s. So I'm going to type 188, and then say I want to filter to just this place. So you could search up here and then do a second search in the bottom. That's kind of the way I would finagle that to get it to give me what I want.
Many periodicals have gone fully digital. How are these being handled in PERSI, and how can they be accessed?
A lot of periodicals that we're getting digitally, like through email, our genealogy serial clerk does an excellent job keeping track of all of that. We actually print them, and then they'll end up in those boxes for a time, and then they end up bound on the shelves. So they're handled much the same way the other ones are, but we just have to print them first.
Nancy is asking, what are the symbols to the left of the call number when searching the catalog for a periodical? She says it looks like a cell phone, and the other one looks like an arrow.
Oh, that's new. That's fancy. See, we're still learning things about the new catalog. You can click on the phone and text the record to your phone, which is kind of cool.
And are patrons able to make lists of the periodicals there in the catalog for when they come in, maybe to visit the Genealogy Center?
So if you're making a list of anything from the regular library catalog, you can press this button that says add to my list. I'll do a couple. And it ends up over here on the left. If you click on show list details, now you don't need a library card to do this. You would need a library card to save the list. But if you come here to the list, you can email that list to yourself, or you can print it. This puts it in the printer-friendly view. And it'll have all the call numbers, or it should. Now, if you're looking for articles to make a list, the way I would do that is actually to do that in PERSI. So say you're finding stuff in PERSI, you need to make a note of the volume and issue number. So what I do oftentimes is I will screenshot that, like the whole row, and just put it in a Word document. It makes life easy for me, but do what works best for you.
Question about payment. How do you handle international funds when people order something like a check in Canadian dollars or versus a money order in US dollars?
I think the Western Union money orders, I mean, we accept them.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, if there was an issue, we would send an email. The form itself actually does, like, it has boxes for your name and your mailing address and your email. So if there is an issue, we just send you an email saying like, hey, we can't accept this for whatever reason. Yeah, we wouldn't just ghost you.
They're asking, can you use Visa or another type of credit card? So the answer is unfortunately no. We're limited to checks and money orders right now. Jolene is wondering how many core subjects are there, and is there a way to view all of the subjects?
So there's a list of subject categories / record types in the handout. Those are kind of the core ones, but there's more. There's more subjects. I'm not sure if there's a way. That's a good question. I'm not sure if there's a way on the public side of PERSI to actually see what all the subjects are, because they're different place to place. Yeah, so you might have some subjects about like a particular like indigenous tribe, for example, that's very specific for that area, but you're not going to have that in a different place.
Jill is asking if the record is texted to your phone, is that only to a US phone, or will it cover UK and Ireland phone numbers also? I don't know the answer to that. I'm guessing it's probably limited to United States phone numbers.
Yeah.
But if you create a list, you can still email it to yourself. Do you know if we have the Irish Ancestral Research Association's periodical? They're looking for the last 18 years or so, and it's also known as TIARA, TIARA.
Yeah. Let's see what we got. So here's the call number, and then this is the date of what we have bound. So this would be, we have 1985 to 86 bound. What were they looking for specifically?
They were just looking to locate if we had that particular periodical, looking for the last 20 years or so. So it looks like we have a full collection of that one.
Oh yeah. And we have even the most recent one for spring of 2024. When it says unbound periodicals, that means it's on that wall that I showed a picture of.
Catherine is wondering, can articles be sent electronically instead of being mailed?
Right on the form, when you send it in, please email, don't mail it. And yeah, they can be emailed.
Is there, when starting out, do you have any lesser known or more unique periodicals that you recommend people starting with or really exploring?
It depends on where they're researching. I'm looking over there because I actually have a stack of Irish periodicals sitting up on the windowsill by my desk. The Irish Genealogical Quarterly is a good one. Familia, Familia. That's good for Northern Ireland. That's I believe the Ulster Genealogical Society. Hold on. Yeah, this is the Ulster Genealogical Review. This is their new one.
I lied, we do have one more. So when writing articles for our society periodical, what is the best way to name that article so it's easy to find in PERSI?
The way PERSI like is indexed is, even if the title is like kind of vague, our indexer will read enough of the article to figure out what exactly is the subject of this thing, and they'll make that the title. So if you can make the title close to the actual subject of the thing, then that's great. It makes their lives a little easier.
So I just wanted to mention, if anybody would like a copy of the chat from today's program, or if you have any questions that pop up after the program, you're welcome to email us at genealogy@acpl.info, and we'll get that to you. And thank you, Elizabeth, for presenting, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks for showing up. Bye.